Hi, welcome back. Welcome to the next lecture. This time we're going to look at visual merchandising online and offline. I think it's primarily interesting, perhaps, that you can use the same kind of basic psychological theory for decision making. It's still a visual process and everything, but you have to look at it from a different perspective because, to some extent, it's very different from. The online is very different from offline, even though you can rely on the same mechanisms. You have to treat them differently. So as I said, 2/3 of all purchase decisions are made in the store, and it's a visual process. We've been through that now a couple of times. So this, of course, is even more perhaps true online, since you lose a lot of the sensory aspects in the offline or online experience. In the physical store, you can try things on, you can touch them, you can smell them, perhaps feel them. Online, you can only look at them, so it's even more of a visual process. And I showed you, 83% of all the input that we process in our brains come from the visual or from the eyes, so the visual senses. And well, obviously that's perhaps even more true online than offline. So what we're going to look at now is three different aspects. The first two very short, just to sort of set the scene, and then the last one more with some more emphasis. Consumer and the multi-channel, retailer and the multi-channel, the store as a source of inspiration on online and offline. So that's like where the true visual merch comes in. Consumer and the multi-channel. We've been through this a bit, but I think it's even more underlined perhaps with when you talk about online. One aspect that you need to take into consideration is that it used to be that we were buying things, now it's more that we're shopping things. And what's the difference? Well, buying is more to fulfill a need, shopping is more for the sake of the shopping itself. One question that we need to always include, or more or less always include, in our consumer behavior studies nowadays is that we ask people for how often they buy things that they're never going to use, meaning that they have products in their wardrobes that they never wore, perhaps haven't even taken them out of the packages yet. And when you probe into that question a little bit, you realize that actually most shoppers have that, at least some examples of that through their purchase history. And the more you have, the more shopper prone you are. The less of those you have, the more buying oriented you are. But if you go from buying to shopping, then the shopping in itself becomes in focus. And to me, for instance, the very existence of discount stores could be an example of this, where people go more to find a discount than to actually look for something that they have the goal of buying. So it's rather that they find something interesting there. So it's rather driven by the stimulus in the store than the need in the mind of the plan in the mind of the shopper. Second sort of aspect is all this focus on e-commerce. We've seen that penetration goes up and up. We saw that in the lecture on multi-channel on Monday, and we can see that it comes in all different categories. And I bet that COVID-19 now is doing its best to sort of push these figures even further. And we can see that the device that's growing the most and driving most is the mobile. It used to be that you could see online shopping as one, but it turns out that you have to adapt your web page to mobile and even your e-commerce site, because a lot of the times, at least for shoppers who have bought from you before, they tend to do more and more of their shopping online, and it's not unusual to have people, while they're sitting by the computer, they also have their phone to look at certain things. And I'm going to show you soon that we behave quite differently depending on if we shop online on the phone, whereas if we buy something online on a computer and you need to display your products differently, you have to focus on different features of the product. Okay, so the consumer behavior is changing also within the multi-channel perspective. What about the retailer? Well, the retailer too has to adapt. We've seen the reasons for multi-channel. We went through this on Monday, so I don't have to go through it again. But you can also see that depending on the category, you need to adapt differently if you're a retailer. So for instance, if you're in furniture, you can see that payment, delivery and so on would be like or anything logistic related would be very important. Whereas if you're in fashion, for instance, it's more about fit and how it's perceived and so on. So you have to look at different solutions when you look at the applications that you add to your online experience. And I'm going to share with you now some features that we're testing for IKEA, and then I'm going to talk a bit about how those differ from some features that we share with, or that we developed together with H&M. But let's start by looking at a couple of videos from IKEA, and these are things that they will add to kind of an iPad that they are also producing themselves. They never buy other brands. They try to do everything in-house. So, well, this is future planning according to IKEA.
Introducing Block & Penna, the fun and easy way to start planning your home. Simply log into the device in store using your email or IKEA family card and start collecting things you like. All you need to do is tap, 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 and items will instantly be added to your block, which you can then use to find out more about the things you've chosen. From products to solutions to whole room sets. You can collect, edit and customize right there in the palm of your hand. And when you're done, Block makes it even easier to purchase, either there in the store or home delivered. Block & Penna, a new way to shop at IKEA.
Okay, so we can see IKEA is actually inventing some new features, some new things here, even a new device. This is the second app in that device.
It's scary to start planning with a blank page. Say hey to adapt. Start with an IKEA product you found, because it's always easier to adapt something than invent it from scratch. Try out different finishes. Change the size. And instantly see how you can adapt IKEA's storage solutions to suit you. And your enormous shoe collection. From the big idea to the little details. Turn almost into just right with Adapt.
So they've interviewed people and found that one sort of obstacle for many shoppers in this case would be to start with a blank paper, and therefore they did this Adapt instead. Here's the third app.
Roomette. It's the fastest and easiest way to plan your room. Start with anything you like, and then add more, until you've got a whole room. Let us help by offering suggestions of what goes with what. Make it look like your home, or get experimental. Quickly see how everything just comes together. Order it all to give your room a whole new look. Or collect the products individually to buy later. Roomette. See your new room in seconds.
Okay, and this fourth app is actually my favorite. It looks a bit plain perhaps in this video, but it's very much like the H&M app I think I showed you yesterday. I lost my phone somewhere else in the house, otherwise I'd show you the H&M application of this, where you can take a photo of a shirt, for instance, and then you can see if it is an H&M shirt, you can see what it is, where you can buy it, how much it is and everything. If it's not an H&M shirt, you can see what they have instead that looks like that. So when you combine the offline world with the online world, I really like that. And I'm gonna show you also how we've done this.
Use space to plan space. Introducing Tactile, the three-dimensional planning tool that makes collaboration faster and easier.
So look on the
With
iPad
Tactile,
to the side now.
you
When they
create
move
digital
something in the
model
modal
by
world,
building with
it
your
also
hands.
happens
It's the
on
best
the
of both
iPad.
worlds. Experiment quickly to see what works and what doesn't. Plan together with your family or with a co-worker. You can then style your digital model right there, or save it for later. Tactile makes planning feel great.
So perhaps that didn't look so fancy, but as I said, with H&M, we've developed that so you can take the photos of the garments and you can find them in the online store. And this is also connected to smart, like Internet of Things with smart fridges. So the idea, we're looking at the ability of taking a photo. You open the fridge door, take a photo of what you have there. You get example recipes, and then you can just, if you want like a recipe, say you have some bacon in there, you think about pasta carbonara, or the phone suggests pasta carbonara, but then you need to add, I don't know, eggs or cream or something. You just push a button and then you get it delivered to your home. So I think that's cool when you sort of look at pretty simple features of the phone, like we talked about on Monday. Camera, ability to create lists or big data, just algorithms, and create sort of what seems to be fantastic new solutions, even though it's relying on existing functions in the phone. So depending on what kind of category you are, how you build your brand or develop the experience that in that way can enhance your brand, depends on sort of what kind of services you can provide. So let's look at the visual merchandising, pure visual merchandising aspects of things. I showed you this, I think, earlier. I hope I did it. I showed you this in the first lecture now on Wednesday, that you need to organize things by color, and we talked about the Stiles-Crawford effect and what you could do with it. I hopefully also showed you this image, which is more or less the same. Organization comes a lot from how you work with color, and to keep it simple for the eye, you need to work with color organization. And a lot of companies miss out on this, even though it's fairly simple to view, but that's simply because they underestimate the power of that in-store purchase or in-store decision making is a visual process. So what happens if you do this online? Well, this is just sort of results page from a eye tracking film. So on the left you have a random presentation, on the right you have color presentation. It's not really that obvious, but you can see on the right hand side that all the yellow come first, and then all the blue, and then all the green, and so on. And if we look at what eye tracking or what the eye movements are when you have a randomized versus an organized assortment. You can see that in the randomized scenario, the eye movements jump around much more, and you pay much more attention. You have more fixations. You stay longer on the randomized page, and actually you stay longer, you look at more products, and you buy more. And why do you get these contradicting effects? Why do you want organization offline and randomization online? Well, it's simple as this. Offline, you go through 2 visual steps before you have come to a purchase. First, you're browsing. So that's like the holistic processing, your analog or your processing of the environment, and to even distinguish a category from among the very cluttered impressions that you have to have some kind of organization. In this first browsing phase, you will not stop, you will not find anything if it's random. So therefore the color blocks helps your eye to distinguish one category from another. However, in the second step, when you're stopping in front of a shelf, then actually a random organization is better, because then you have to look more, you have to spend more time to search and find what you look for. So you look at more products, you spend more time, and therefore become interested in more products and buy more products if it's a randomized display. So the whole difference is based on that. In the online store, you just click on or perhaps even search for a category or even a product to get to the results page, where you have perhaps, 6 to 15 or so different products. And then you're sitting with those 6 to 15 products in front of you. So then it's time for the randomized step. The whole key behind the usefulness of the organized display is that that's only helpful in the search process, and you never do this search process visually online. You click instead on categories or subcategories or search. So you don't need the organization online to the same extent as you do offline. Okay, and then we're going to compare distal and proximal shopping. Proximal shopping is when you buy something with a touch screen. Distal shopping is when you buy something using a computer, whether it's a desktop or a laptop. And we can see here that in proximal shopping, when you have a touch screen, you want to physically manipulate. You want to increase, decrease, touch, look at, turn the things more. And you will be this touching, this eagerness to turn, increase the size of, and so on, makes you more detail oriented in your processing. So you will rely more on various attributes, and you will recall them to a greater extent if you do that. And this also depends to some extent on the category. So if it's a touch product, such as a piece of cloth as compared to service, all these aspects of wanting to touch and so on will increase. And this is actually exactly what's being found in studies on this, that if you want to sell a high touch product, you do much better if you work with a proximal tool. So companies such as H&M, for instance, they do better if they can push people to, for instance, even in stores, perhaps buy things with the help of their phones. Whereas if you're a service industry, you would rather like to have people buying your products with the help of a computer, because that's a low touch product which is selling better with digital devices. And also in the high touch context, you should rely more on imagery and pictures, whereas in the digital you should rely more on textual information. So that's a second kind of difference. You have to also, in that previous case, look at what kind of product you have and what kind of device the shopper typically is using. Okay, a third aspect here is, I think this is sort of telling a bit also about the kind of shopping decision. So here we're going to look at mannequins, and there are sort of two layers of findings or key lessons from this. One is how you can actually work with it, but the other is it also tells something about the decision-making process online versus offline. Thing is, here we found that Zara and H&M were very different when it came to how they used modals online. Zara used modals where they didn't show the heads of the modals online, whereas H&M showed the full or at least upper body of the model with the head. So this made us curious, because initially my co-authors in this paper thought that the mere fact that there was a face on the imagery or on the images or ads for H&M made a difference, but I felt that it would rather be that the face would distract people from looking at the garments. So we went ahead with this, and we also found that in stores, in physical stores, it's very different how they use mannequins. In some cases, mannequins are like this, sort of light bulb kind of mannequins. Sometimes mannequins don't have heads at all, and sometimes they are very, very human-like. So we created online tests and tests in stores. We used eye tracking, questionnaires, and sales data, and we compared modals with and without heads online, and mannequins with and without heads offline. And you can see these are the scenarios. And what we actually found was this, that online you do better if you have headless modals, whereas in store or offline you do better if you have mannequins with heads. And this is, I think, as I said, of course interesting if you're working with fashion retail, but also it's interesting from sort of a consumer behavior point of view, because it says something about how you make decisions online versus offline. First, I should say that we found a mediator here. Sorry, and the mediator is how easy you find it to envision yourself wearing the outfit. So obviously, online you find it easier to envision yourself wearing the outfit if the model does not have a head. But the opposite is true in the store, that there you find it easier to envision yourself wearing the outfit if the mannequin has a head. And when you look deeper into this, you realize that it's so that if you take the model online, there you have more time to sort of really sit and think about how would I look in this, I don't know, dress or suit or something, and say that the model doesn't look exactly like you, say that you're blonde and the model has dark hair, then it's harder for you to envision yourself wearing it. So in the online context, you have more time to really sit still, think through it, and look at the model, and then any kind of deviance between or difference between you and the model will distract you. Okay, but in the physical store, you don't have the same amount of time. So it's more that it's really cluttered, the environment is really cluttered, and there's so much to look at, and it's more that you quickly glance at the mannequin, and then the more human-like the mannequin, the easier it is to see any human at all wearing that outfit. So, and this is of course nothing that the industry was aware of. So it's quite fascinating because they spent quite a lot of time and effort to work with these models. So likelihood to buy, purchase, and attitude towards the store and the brand and the garments all work the same here. That online you want to use headless models, but offline you want to use mannequins with heads. Yeah, and this is basically the same. Would you like to buy the? Would you buy the outfit? So yeah, it's the same. We should say this was also mediated by another factor, or actually moderated. Sorry, moderated by another factor, and that was, like we talked about on Monday, and in accordance with the elaboration likelihood model, the knowledge of the shopper. So the more knowledgeable shoppers were not as affected by these, like we call them on Monday, system one kind of aspects. This is really peripheral aspects, if the model has a head or not. I mean, if you're a connoisseur in fashion, you can see through the kind of model they use. You don't need the model to understand what the outfit looks like. So then you can rely on your own judgment to a greater extent. So it's more for novices that you need these extra tricks to help the system one kind of or peripheral cues to aid your decision making. Okay, so that was a quick walkthrough of some differences when it comes to brand building online and offline, and how you need to work with visual merchandising.